Once again, everyone, Eric Chappelle, Community Evangelist for InfraWorks 360, and I want to welcome you to today's webcast, which is Animating InfraWorks 360 Model Components Part 3. So we have Willy Campbell with us today. I think originally Dave was going to join us, but he is handling an urgent matter, so I don't think he will be joining us. Thankfully, Willie is ready to roll with today's content. For those of you who are new, who haven't attended one of these webcasts before, this is our bi-monthly webcast series. We do this on the first and third Wednesdays of the month. We've been doing this since last April, so we're coming up on almost a year in the length of this series. And the goals with the series are just to get you closer, you being the end users, closer to the folks who make the software here at Autodesk. Now, I would say most of the time we have you hear from our product team members, but it's also nice to hear from some of the other folks who are really dug in and doing some amazing things with InfraWorks 360 and other parts of the company as well. And in the case of this series, it's been Dave and Willie who are in our enterprise priority support team who handle support for our very large customers. So it's great to hear from them as well. Our next webcast, the important thing to note about this webcast, this is actually going to be a week late from our normal schedule. We're going to move, normally we'd go, I think, February 3rd. That would be the first Wednesday, but we're going to postpone this webcast by 1 week because we've got some exciting news to share about what's new in InfraWorks 360. So you're not going to want to miss that one, but please note that it is 1 week later than usual. And information about that, being able to sign up and access that webcast will be coming soon. Check out the community site, the forum, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. You will see information posted about how to reserve your spot for that webcast in the next several days. So make sure to be watching those channels. As we always do, we're going to do our poll, which is to see what your current usage level of InfraWorks 360 is. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll. So if you wouldn't mind, just take a second to give us your answer as to what your usage level is, ranging from not even having it installed to using it on almost every project. And I'll give you folks a few seconds to provide your answers there. And I think we're seeing our trend continue with growth on the regular use on some projects. And that's, of course, very promising to see. We're definitely seeing here at Autodesk a trend in the upward direction with the adoption and awareness and use of InfraWorks 360. So this is definitely an exciting time to see this revolutionary product really taking hold out there in the industry. So I'm going to go ahead and close down the poll. I appreciate all of you who provided your answers. I want to tell you a little bit more about our community. You can find the main Community Hub webpage at autodesk.com/InfraWorks360 community. From there, you can jump out to the forum where you can interact with other users and with our product team just to get questions answered and to maybe answer some of your own if you happen to be an InfraWorks 360 expert yourself. We've also got the idea station where you can submit ideas about how you'd like to see the software improved or enhanced, and you can generate support for your ideas by getting the community to vote for them. And of course, if the product team sees a lot of support for a given idea, it's going to move it that much further up in the list for implementation. InfraTips has been a very popular site with lots of quick, just a couple of minute tips on, how to do certain things or be more productive in certain areas. We've got a number of authors that contribute to that here at Autodesk, from the product team to the sales team to support, marketing, all over the company. If there's something cool to share, we really encourage folks to share that on InfraTips. The gallery is where you can see projects of other customers of ours. So maybe the company around the corner from you or halfway across the world, but it's a great place to see the kinds of things that people are doing with InfraWorks 360, and there really is some amazing stuff up there. Highly recommend checking that out. Social Hub is a stream of, Facebook, Twitter, and various blogs that have to do with InfraWorks 360, and then any videos that show up on our YouTube site are also fed into the community site, as well as the recordings from this webcast series, including this one. If all goes smoothly, this recording will be posted by the end of the day. So if you have a friend who wasn't able to make it, you can send them the link to the community site, and from there they can locate the recording of today's webcast. We also have a new learning tab on the InfraWorks 360 community. If you haven't been to the community site for a couple days or a week or so, this is very fresh. You're definitely going to want to check out this learning tab. It's going to be a big help to you if you're trying to learn different parts of the software. Doesn't matter if you're a newbie or if you've been using it for a while, there's stuff here for everybody. I don't think we have any discussions on preview features today, but in case we do, we just want you to be clear that any discussion of a preview or labs feature is not a promise that that feature will be a fully supported official feature in an upcoming release, and that you can't be assured that it will be in an upcoming release until you actually see it there. Sorry, but our legal department requires us to pass that along. We want to encourage you to ask lots of questions throughout the webcast. Unfortunately, Dave is not going to be with us to answer the 3ds Max questions, but we'll definitely keep a log of all your questions, and if I'm unable to answer them, we will follow up with you after the webcast and make sure we get answers to the things that are on your mind. And if possible, I may break in and interrupt Willie once or twice to ask some questions if I see any themes developing or anything of particular interest come across the questions window, which, by the way, we can't open up the phone lines. Our group is just a little too big. It would be pandemonium, so we do have to limit our questions to the questions window, but we will be watching that actively as the webcast progresses. So please ask questions. It just makes it more interesting for all of us. So with that, I'm going to hand the controls over to Willie, and he's going to take it from here.
All right.
The floor is yours, Willie.
All right. Good morning, afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining today. So like Eric mentioned, Dave initially had set this up, Dave Tyner had initially set this up to try and mostly start from InfraWorks and skip the Civil 3D step and go right into 3D Studio Max to try and attain some of the goals that we did last time. And that was actually the plan for the first portion of today's webcast. We were going to start with Dave. He was going to do that and then skip over to me to show InfraWorks to Civil how we can do some controls, and then we were going to go into 3D Studio Max. And inside 3D Studio Max, we want to keep with the theme that we've been working on. Jerry mentioned it in his last webcast, and I mentioned it in my previous webcast as well, using the Civil View extension inside of 3D Studio Max, just to kind of keep the familiarity there. So, because Dave's not here, I've got a kind of a shortened portion, but I'm going to go ahead and start. I will be starting in InfraWorks like we did last time. I will be working into Civil 3D, covering the points that are necessary to be able to control vehicle movement. So last time we went through and created vehicles following a centerline path in offset directions, and they were basically, as you saw, it was a repeat pattern. So this time we're going to try and create controls for individual vehicles to try and make them appear in the video to stop and to pull over and change lanes and things like that. So inside of InfraWorks, here you can see my screen. So I have, this time I've started with component roads, and you can see that I've got an intersection here and an intersection down at the south end, and this is the road that I'm going to be focusing on today. Now, if we zoom in here, I have two lanes that would head in the north direction that merge right around this red box. And I've got down here at the southbound lane, I have a bus turnout where a bus would pull off the road, stop, pick up passengers, etc., and then continue on. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at what it would take to get a bus to follow the specified path, to change the lane, to stop during the animation, and then continue on afterward. So you'll notice that I've got these red bounding boxes here. I've got one for the bus turnout, and I've got one for the lane merge. This is actually just a coverage area inside my model, because when I go through and I export this data as an IMX into Civil 3D, I would otherwise not have any control or any knowledge of where The transition area is inside the model, and I would have no control over where the bus turnout is inside the model, because exporting IMX, you only get the centerline data. So I've already taken the step to export the IMX. It's just like we did last time. So we'll go ahead and use the export tool here, export IMX, select my area, and then I'll open it up in Civil 3D. So in Civil 3D, this is what I get from the IMX. So I get several surfaces in here, and again, this is just like last time, but I only get that centerline information for these roads that cross each other. Now, if you look in the model, you can see that I have a bounding box here, which I believe just ends up being a 3D polyline. That is my coverage area that you could see in the InfraWorks model. So this one here, and then I get another one on the other side. So this tells me this is where I need to go through and put my bus turnout, and this is where I need to make my lanes merge. So last time we used two center lines, or actually sorry, we just used one center line to control the movement of the vehicles, and that's fine if you're just doing standard traffic flow without any lane changes or any changes in the traffic patterns, meaning stopping and going. But today what we're going to do is we're going to create a path. I'm going to have a bus come up to the kind of the northwest corner here. It's going to start down this road, it's going to stop, it's going to make the turn, and then it's going to transition to the bus turnout and then transition back into traffic. So what I would need to do that is I would need a separate control for the bus. So to do that, I'm going to use the similar tools I did last time. Go to the Home tab in Civil 3D, feature line from alignment, and I'm going to pick the first alignment, which is going to be this crossing road here. So the important thing when you're creating alignments is they need to be created inside of a site. If they're not in a site, then they won't be exported when we bring these out and export them ready for 3D Studio Max. So I should have another site here called Site 1. I am going to give it a name. I'll leave it generic for now. I am going to turn on the weeding options, and I also want to make sure that when I do this, I uncheck Create Dynamic Link to the alignment, because if I have the dynamic link, it won't let me export into 3D Studio Max. So I will create that. It's going to go through and tell me it's going to weed the vertex. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot one step. Feature line from alignment. The reason it was giving me 3 vertices is because I had selected the wrong default profile. I need to use the Autodesk InfraWorks proposed ground surface profile. So that will give me a profile for the entire length of that feature line. Otherwise it does not. It only gives me a shorter portion. So the weed is selected. We'll change the site. Try this again. That looks better. So now it's giving me the entire length of that line, and it's telling me that 69 of 96 vertices will be weeded out, so I'll have a few left. So click the check. You can see the ribbon changes. It's telling me it's feature line number 7. So I have a feature line there, and I need to do the same thing for this center line. So feature line from alignments. Make sure to set my site. Make sure to set my profile. And it's set to weed. I'll click OK. And you can see now that 423 of 498 vertices will be weeded. And I will click OK. So now I have a feature line for both of these roads, and I'm going to use some of the feature line tools, stepped offset, trims, and fillets, to go ahead and create my drive path. So what I want to look at real quick is to verify that the feature lines are actually legit and following the profile view. So I'm just using the view cube here in the northwest quadrant, and you can see labeled down at 0 I have my alignments, and then up floating in space I've got my feature lines. And if we follow this feature line down to the south end, you can see that it's actually reaching down to 0 for some reason, because the profile doesn't actually extend all the way to the center line of that road. And that's okay. We can just do a quick elevation edit, and I'll scroll up to the top to the beginning. You can see the elevation is 0, and I'm just going to match the 103s that's on here. So 103.18, and I'll accept it. And so now you can see that that feature line is actually sitting at that proposed surface all the way across, and my crossing feature line is also sitting there. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to switch back to the top view, Now that I've verified, rotate it back 90 degrees. And I'm going to create stepped offset for these two alignments. So what I want to do, so inside InfraWorks here, I've got a lane, and when I use these component roads, these are by default set to 10-foot wide lanes. It's a little skinnier than we're probably used to, but that's okay. So it's just a known fact. So to get that center line, I'm going to offset the center line to the center of the road 5 feet, and then I'll need to offset an additional 10 feet to get from the center of this lane to the center of the bus turnout. So back in Civil, I will select my feature line, and I will go up to Edit Geometry, and right here on the bottom right there's a stepped offset command, and it's asking me for the distance. I'm going to start with 5, and I'm going to pick the side. I'll pick the south side, and specify the offset, the elevation difference. So if I do have a cross slope on a road, I could change, set a variable for the cross slope distance of the road. But in this case it should be a flat road, so I'm going to enter 0. And now I have an offset feature line for the center line of that travel lane. And I want to do the same thing with my north-south road here. So I'm going to repeat the command. Distance is going to be 5. Actually, I need to select the feature line first. Pick that, set my distance, pick the offset side with a 0 offset. This one will take a little longer because there are more feature lines, or sorry, there are more elevation points along this road segment, and that's why it's partially important to let those points weed out, because if the more points there are, the longer it's going to take to create that offset. So this will just take a second here. There we go. So I have it offset at 5 feet now, so that represents the center line of the main travel lane on the southbound lane. And I also want to, I'm going to do it one more time. I'm going to do it from this one. I'm going to offset it 10 feet, and that will represent the center line of the bus turnout. So stepped offset, the distance of step is going to be 10. Specify the side, this side, and the elevation difference is 0. And then once this is done, this will give us the center line of the travel lane coming up toward from the northwest, and then we'll do a fillet, we'll do a trim, we'll join these lines, and then we'll create the bus turnout. So you guys can see that process of what it would take to create a feature line that's going to drive what we want the bus to do. Give it another second here. And of course, it always takes longer when we're live on the webs. All right, so I've got 5 feet and 10 feet. So now what I want to do is I want to create, if we look back at InfraWorks, we have the intersection here that we're going to work on. I want to create this turn from this lane into this lane. So in Civil, we'll come back in here. I'm going to select one of the feature lines. And again, I'm going to go up to Edit Geometry, and I'm going to use the Trim tool. And it's asking me to select the trimming edges. So I'll pick this line, and enter, and then I'll select these. It's just like a regular trim tool, but you actually have to launch it from the feature line tools, because a regular trim won't work on your feature lines if you've never done it before. And now there's a pretty good chance, and in fact I know that these two lines, these 2 points actually don't line up and touch each other. So what I'm going to do is just select one end, grip edit it, and then I'm going to snap it to the end point of this line to force the elevations to match. So now that they match, I can use the fillet command, which is right here under Edit Geometry, and I want to set a R for radius. In this case I'll just set 15 to start, and then I want to use J for join, and then I'm going to pick this line. And when I do that, it's now filleted that feature line at a 15-foot radius. So if I decide that that's too big or too small, I can always come up to the next button here, Edit Curve, pick the curve. Let's say that actually needs to be 20. I can see whether it's going to be at 20 feet or 25 or 30 or 50, whatever I need to set that to. We'll just leave it at 20. That's okay. I'll hit Apply. So it makes that change, and now we're good. So now I have the bus driving up to that intersection and making the turn onto the next lane. And the last thing that I want to do on this one is come down to where the bus turnout is going to be and create that transition. So if we look at this bounding box back here in InfraWorks, excuse me. So we look at the bounding box, it actually, I've got it set up so it starts at the end of that transition, and if I come over here, I can use the measure point-to-point distance tool, and I can see that that's roughly about 50 feet to the end of that transition. So just to kind of give me an idea, I don't want to make the transition start too soon. I don't want to make it end too late, otherwise I'm going to be driving over the curb with my bus. So back to civil. So now that I have this feature line, what I'm going to do is just simply draw a feature line between these 2 points, do some trimming and do some quick filleting, and then we'll have our complete feature line. So I'm going to type, come up here to feature line, I'm going to create it, I'm going to make sure it goes into Site 1, and I'm going to click OK, and I'm just going to shift right click will bring up my snaps, and I'm going to click R for nearest. So I want to snap. I'm not being real specific on this one. Obviously, if I was really doing that, I would take the time to go in and find out, do some offsets and stuff. But I'm going to select the nearest point here, right click to accept the 103.43 elevation point. And that didn't work. Oh, autosave. Oh, thank you, autosave. Feature line. Create feature line. Let's try this one more time. This time without the autosave. So again, R for nearest, pick there, accept the elevation, do a nearest here, and depending on how smooth or how rough I want that transition to be, pick right about there, and select the default elevations, right click again to end, and then I'm going to do the same thing down on the other end. So feature line, Site 1, and here, elevation accepted, and we'll come out to, we'll say here, and we'll accept that as well, and we'll finish it. So now I've got the beginnings of my transition out to the bus turnout. So again, I'm going to use the trim. I'll select the feature line, find the trim, pick both cutting edges, enter, and then select the point between to get rid of the lane between, and then I will use trim. This will be my cutting edge to get rid of the excess on this end, and then one more time down here, trim, this is my cutting edge, and get rid of the excess. Now, before when I did the trim, I had to move the endpoints so the elevations matched, so when you use the fillet command, it will actually fillet and make sure that they join. Because when I created these shorter feature lines, these transition lines, if you will, when I created these, I used the snap and I picked the elevation points at these lines, which means that it's going to line up already. So I can just grab feature line and come into fillet, and I want to join, and I'm going to pick this one, and it's now joined, and I believe it's still a 20-foot radius, or maybe 15. We can check. I want to click fillet, J for join, pick the next one. I've got my fillet set, and then just continue on here, J for join, joined, and finally the last one, J for join, here. So now I have set my transitions. They look pretty small, so I'm going to go ahead and make those a little bigger to make it a smoother transition for the bus as it turns. So pick the line here. Now I just set it at 15, so I'm going to go ahead and set it at 30. Click apply. So you can see that it's a bigger transition, and I can go as big as I want. If I wanted to make it 50 or 100, I can easily do that. Set it to 30, and hit enter so you can see it. Click apply, a little smoother transition, and I'll do the same thing down here real quick. So the point is I'm coming through here, and I'm making this path for the bus. And if I don't have a smooth transition, and this is similar to before, last time we talked about setting the elevation points along the feature line. So I've got a nice smooth transition across these now. The last thing I would do is I would come in here and clean up the starting and end point to match the end of the curb returns here on the feature line, but we're not going to go through all of the feature lines. You guys have seen the process now, but I'll show you what the end results are going to look like for what we want to achieve. Actually, the last thing I will do is insert elevation points. I'm going to use I for increment, and I'm going to set it to 5 feet. And you could do that as much or as little as you want. Just remember that on the curves, you're going to want more. You're going to want to enter on the side of more points along the curve to avoid a rough transition around a corner. So now I've got through, and I've got elevation points every 5 feet along that feature line. So now I've created, if we go back to look at InfraWorks, I have created a route for this bus to travel from the lane on the left here, around the corner, down the southbound lane, into the bus turnout, and then back out. And now, if I wanted to have other traffic following along this road here on a different path, I would need to create a separate path. So I've already done that in this other drawing. And so in this drawing, if we look, I've got a feature line set up for the bus turnout just like we did. It travels down the road into the bus turnout and then back out. I have another feature line here that represents just traveling down the road for the southbound. And then on the northbound side, I created a lane that goes from the intersection, and this one actually takes the turn. So I have some vehicles that are turning, and finally I have another feature line that represents the lane transition down to the single lane. So you can see this box that represents where the lane itself actually ends. So I have the transition set before that, and these vehicles continue on straight. Now, you'll probably notice that my alignment goes clear up around the corner here. And what happens is, what we have is a repeating pattern, if you will, from InfraWorks. As you set these animations to run, they just repeat. And if you want it to be smooth, meaning when it gets to the end of the cycle that it does, you don't want cars jumping and disappearing and resetting themselves, the lengths need to match. So if you have more than one lane, more than one thing happening, the lengths will need to match. So these two northbound lane lengths are a pretty close match to the overall length. And that's why we're stopping here, because this is the determining factor of this road. So if I wanted to make it go all the way, I would need to lengthen this one and do something else with this one. And then the same on the southbound side. If we look at the bus turn versus the through lane, those feature lines are actually the same length. So I've got 4 feature lines now, 2 for my southbound single lane and 2 for my northbound double lane that transitions into a single lane. So I would do just like we did last time. I would come into the Output tab and export to 3D Studio Max, and I'm going to uncheck surfaces because I don't need those. And then the Site 1 is what contains those 4 feature lines that I created. The other thing that I did forget to mention real quick, if I pick on a feature line and we look at the properties here, you can see that the name of this feature line is southbound bus lane. So this is specific for use inside of 3D Studio Max, because you want to give it a name, and you want to make it specific for those. You don't want it to be feature line 1, feature line 2, feature line 3 like that. You want to give it a specific name and let it stay as that. So each of these has a different southbound, northbound name. So when that gets exported as a feature line, then that's what shows up in 3D Studio Max. So let's shift gears. 3D Studio Max. I'm going to go to Civil View and launch it. Again, this is command load or demand load. It doesn't launch automatically when you load 3D Studio Max, so you would have to launch that each time you start the program. And once I've done that, I can go to the Civil View Explorer and then double click on it to dock it. So like I mentioned last time, this is something that's similar to the prospector inside Civil 3D, where we can find the data that we have inside the model or inside our project here. So I'm going to go to Geometry Import. I'm going to find the VSP3D file that I created when I exported from Civil 3D. And this is going to contain, so you can see I have a northbound lane merge, northbound right turn, southbound bus lane, southbound no turns. So these are the 4 feature lines that I want to import into 3D Studio Max. And you can see the number of points that each feature line has is listed here. It is a single spline. And I'll click OK. We will see the global shift information. This is just like we talked about before. You can write this down now, or we can find it later to apply it when we go back into InfraWorks. And I'll select yes and yes to accept those defaults, and there we go. So now inside of 3D Studio Max I have my 4 separate feature line representations of the lanes. So to start, I'm going to do the southbound lanes, and I'm going to start with the bus turning, coming down this road and stopping, and then it's going to continue on and pull out to the bus turnout and stop at the bus turnout, and then it's going to continue on. So I'm going to set the southbound lanes first. Now, one thing to also note, I mentioned a minute ago that these 2 feature lines on the northbound side match in length. They're also different than the southbound length, which means that my overall frame rate is going to be different between the southbound and the northbound. So when I do this, I would actually create 2 separate DAE files and then export those, because the links will be different. Because northbound and southbound have no interaction, it's okay that they don't match up. And the reason that they need to match up is if this lane was longer, so the traffic that follows on the northbound lane transitions over, and let's say it continued all the way to the end, but we left this lane shorter, what's going to happen is these cars are going to get to the end of their life cycle, and they're going to reset while these cars are still traveling. So there's a potential for overlapping vehicles that look like they're driving on top of each other. That's why we want to keep them the same length. Okay, so that said, what I'm going to do first is I'll just go ahead and throw some vehicles on this southbound lane here. So we will go back to Civil View, go to Civil View, Object Placement Style Editor, and this is like we did last time, and I'm going to create new element. I'm going to select cars, because that's what I want to be applied to this lane, and I'm going to select the parent shape, which is going to be this southbound lane. You'll see right here, southbound no turns. I do want to place random at multiple at random stations. I don't want 20. It's not. We don't want this to be a crowded freeway. I'm going to start with 5. I'm going to set the miles per hour to 35, and I'm going to use random objects from the selected category. In this case, the selected category is cars, so anything inside this category is going to be randomly selected and placed on that lane. And I'm going to click Apply. So applying will go through and create 5 vehicles along this path. All right. So if you look, my vehicles on the southbound lane are actually headed northbound, and that's okay, because that's how my feature line was defined. My feature line starts at the south end and works its way to the north. I could reverse that before I export it from Civil 3D, or to change that, I simply come into miles per hour, set this to negative, and add a rotation of 180 degrees. Hit Apply again, and it's going to go through and flip my cars around so they're facing in the right direction. And then as I scrub through this, you'll see that they're starting to drive in the right direction forward. So that's what I want to start. And then I'll click OK. It's going to ask me if I want to save. What it means is, do you want to save this new asset that you created, 5 vehicles with the rotation and the speed? In this case, I don't want to save it. And another way that you can place vehicles along paths inside, you could do it outside of the object placement style editor that we just used. You can do it one at a time and be specific with your vehicle. So I'm going to select the lane for the bus turnout. I'm going to come over to the Resources tab under Civil View, pick Vehicles, and from the list I'm going to find the GMC bus. I'm going to right-click on that. I'm going to use Place Object on Selected Shapes, and then I'm going to select Animated at Constant Speed. And I'm going to set it to 35 to match those guys. So we'll click OK. So now we have our bus. And if I start to scrub through this animation by taking this slider and dragging it along, you can see that we have carnage, right? We've got this bus crashing into other vehicles. That's fine. This bus is going to stop and wait for its turn to merge into traffic before it gets going again. But before I do that, what I want to do, if you notice down here, it says 0 of 1,000. I have 1,000 frames by default in my scene. And what that means is this animation is going to play more than one full cycle as we go through. It's going to get to the end, and it's going to just repeat itself. And that's actually what I want, because I want these vehicles to do a complete double pattern, cycle through twice, so we can have the bus stop and continue to have the vehicles moving. So what I want to do to start, I'm going to grab this car, I'm going to go back to Civil View Explorer, and I'm going to set him to the very end of this line. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I need to determine what halfway through, how many frames it takes to get this car from start to finish, and then I'll double it for my overall frame rate. And if this is confusing now, it'll make sense in a few minutes when we get this all put together. So I'm going to slide him along, and I'm going to move down to the end. Oop, too far. And I'm going to scrub along, and eventually there's my vehicle. So what I want to look for is when he disappears. And down here in the corner I can go to the next frame. And what I want is to look for when he disappears. So he just disappears, so I'm going to go back one. So that is frame 468. So one cycle through is 468 frames, which means 2 cycles through is going to be 900 and, not good with math, 936. That took way too long, sorry. So I want to come in then and set my overall frame rate from 1000 to 936. So I will pick the time configuration, and you can see the end time is 1000. I'm going to set that to 936, and I'm going to click OK. So now I've just changed the end of the animation. If we go all the way to the end again, we'll get right up here to where that bus and that car are ready to repeat themselves. And that's exactly what we want. So now, let's go back and get this bus to stop. So normally, inside 3D Studio Max, if you want to keyframe something, if I pick the bus, you'll notice down here at the bottom, there is a black bar at the 0. So that's a keyframe that gets set when I place the vehicle. And if we look at back on the Civil View Explorer panel, this information on the bottom here is about this bus. And if I pick, this is my keyframes, this stands for my automatic keyframes that were set, and if I pick the little next to it, that's going to bring up basically what they call the curve editor. And this is the length of my animation at the bottom, and 1 is the first complete cycle and 2 is the second complete cycle. And what I need to do is move this back to, so I pick the keyframe up here in the top right, if you can't see that, sorry, it's a little hard to see. I've got a keyframe at the beginning and I've got a keyframe at the end. So I'm going to set this one, pick it again, set this back to 936 and hit enter. So now I've set that keyframe, and you can see the keyframe back here at the beginning. And what I actually want to do, I want the bus to only travel through the map one time while the cars actually complete a second full cycle. So with this selected, I'm going to set this to 1 and hit enter. So now it's telling the bus, so let's just look at that. I'll click to exit this, and let's look what the bus happens now. Before he was crashing into those guys, and now he's not, but he's also going slower because he's only doing 1 complete cycle while the other vehicles do 2. All right, so I have a keyframe at the beginning and I have a keyframe at the end. And what I would normally do inside of 3D Studio Max is move my vehicle to a certain position. Let's say I want to get to about right where the turn starts for him to stop, and I would normally be able to hit set keys, but with the way that these, and then you would see another keyframe down here, but the way that Civil View works is a little different. So what I could do is I could come up here and turn back on that view, and I could create and use the add keys and add a keyframe here, but I'm going to do it a little different in this case. I'm going to turn on the auto key mode. This will all turn red, And you can see that I have my vehicle at 149.188. I'm going to round that to 150. And when I round that, it's going to set a keyframe at 150. So wherever I decide I want it to stop, all I need to do is have that selected, use my civil view, and round this to a whole number. Now, if I want to copy that position, I can use the Shift key and select that keyframe and slide it over. And I'm going to set him, well, we'll just say 300 to start. So now what happens is my bus pulls up and he stops. And he doesn't continue on until he gets to this next keyframe that tells him he can move again. So he's waiting for traffic, he's waiting for other things to happen. Obviously we've got carnage and death again because we're sending him right into the traffic. So let's go ahead and set that a little further down the road. And it's okay, so this is actually where you go through and play with these settings and see what works best for your animation. So now he's got it clear, he's going to drive down the road, but he's going, again, too slow for the vehicles. What I can do, because that gap is wrong for these vehicles, he waits too long, I can drag this back, and then I can also come in and set these two vehicles, I believe, are the ones he's waiting for. Yep, the red and the blue. So what I can do is I can just pick this guy, and I can slide him further along. And I can pick this guy, and I can slide him further along. You know, they don't need to crash into each other. So now, when he comes up and stops, they're going to be traveling through, and my other keyframe that I moved back now works. So I'm going to need to get him to speed up to get down to the bus station, but let's get him down there. And we'll say he'll stop right about here. So again, I've got my bus selected. I'll select my bus. Come on. Select my bus. And it's at 813.56, so I'm just going to say 814. And now it's going to set a keyframe there. But because he's going too slow to get there, I'm going to drag this one back to about here. So let's check his speed. Is he railroading? He's going a little fast now. So we can slide it up. So you're going to have to go through and decide where you want to place these. So get them to there, to that position. I'll use the Shift and Select again, and I'll drag it over for the wait time. We'll just go here for now. So we'll see that now he's railroading that car because he's sped up. That's okay, we can adjust that later. So he's turning off, he's stopping, he's letting passengers off, he's letting passengers on, and then he's going to take off and he's going to crash into these cars. So we can slide that down a little bit more, make sure that there's no overlap. He's going to get going a little more. Yeah, so now he's charged, and so we're going to need to move those two vehicles back a little bit. That's okay. We can slide them back to here, maybe a little further. So again, this is something that you're going to have to go through and try when you work on this to make sure that you know, you're not getting vehicles that are overlapping. So we could sit here and spend all day playing with these guys, speeding up and slowing down, but you get the idea. The bus is turning out and stopping. So I've already gone through and taken the steps to create the bus flowing in the correct keyframes and the vehicles with the correct keyframes, and I've also done the northbound traffic with the lanes merge and the turning lanes. So I'm just going to open that up so we can see what that looks like. I don't need to save those changes just for sake of time. So overall, actually, let's look at the southbound. This is ready for export. So you can see I've got my same controlling features, and as we scrub through this, the bus is going to stop. He's going to wait for the appropriate time for the vehicles to pass. He's going to merge in. He's going to pull out to the bus turnout. He's going to wait for the appropriate gap, and then he'll merge in between those vehicles. So if we pick the bus, you can see that I've got my keyframes set at the bottom. So this is where he stops. This is where he starts again on the turn. This is where he pulls over and stops at the turnout, and this is where he merges again. So if we play that through, you can see how it flows, and hopefully this plays okay for you guys. So you can see him pull up to a stop and continue on. He'll wait for the appropriate time, get going again, merge into traffic. So there is a little bit of trial and error to make these line up. It doesn't take too long. You may want to reduce the number or change the number of vehicles, change the number of spacing if you're having trouble getting them to line up. So you can see when you hit apply from the object placement style editor, it does it randomly. So you'll need to work on the spacing for those. And you can see that the bus runs through one time, while the vehicles that are traveling southbound run through 2 complete cycles. So when he waits for this blue vehicle here, it may be the same blue vehicle that he waits for. It may be this one that he pulls out behind on the bus turnout. And if we look at the northbound that I set up, so this is northbound ready to export. So well, now we have vehicles. So I'm using Alt and middle mouse button and turn on the orbit. So you can see that I've got vehicles coming, and I'll hit place just so you guys can see. So I've got vehicles that don't overlap. If they were driving next to each other on the lines, obviously when the lanes merge up at this point, then they would crash into each other. The vehicles that they just follow the path. So it looks like it's something that they're making maybe a decision to do when the bus turns things, but it's just, you just have to remember everything that you set up, everything has to be set up inside of 3D Studio Max before you export it to InfraWorks, because it's either playing or it's not. So you can see that the buses, the vehicles are coming up, they're merging, they're turning, they're going straight. And again, the northbound lane length is shorter than the southbound length, and that's why I've got these set up separately, because I have to export them as separate DAE object files to bring into InfraWorks. So with that, and again, we would come into File Export and then use the export and select a DAE file from the list here to create that and then make our export. And just like and then the process to bring it into InfraWorks is exactly the same as we did last time. So let's see what this looks like with vehicles running, with the bus turning. So I'm going to zoom in down here. We'll come down to where the bus turns and ends into the bus turnout. So you can see the bus traveling down the lane. He pulls over and stops. Passengers on, passengers off. And he's actually going to wait for this yellow car that's approaching before he emerges back in. And he goes back to the end and resets himself, comes to the stop sign, merges in behind the yellow car. So you can see that it's a repeated pattern. These vehicles happen to run twice to get it to work, and that's about it. So I've got my vehicles transitioning, I've got cars turning. So like I said, everything needs to have its own path. So if you want it to do something different than all the other vehicles are doing, it's going to have to be a separate individual path. And set your speeds and bring in your imports. Also remember, let's look at the data that I have in the project here. So I have my northbound lanes and I have my southbound lanes. I also have crazy roads, so it's actually the same model as before that we used for the last webcast. There's my other vehicles moving. So you can see that even though I've got a ton of vehicles here and I've got a ton of vehicles here, I'm still able to work fairly quickly and easily inside the model without any serious degradation. Obviously, the more you get, you're gonna start to lose performance. And just remember that when you bring these object files in, we set them as city furniture, and there is the potential for the shift. I found it's less likely to shift if when I use the coordinate system that's the default when I start in InfraWorks and I export. This one happens to be UTM 8410 north. If I set that in Civil and I bring that back in and set it in InfraWorks, I have less chance of a shift. And again, these offsets match what comes in from Studio Max. And if you forgot where those were, if we click on Civil Explorer, Scene Settings, it's the global shift. So these numbers would need to match what's going on in InfraWorks. All right, let's find InfraWorks here. These numbers, but again, I have a slight shift, so they're going to be a little different. And then I do also have a scale factor of feet to meters to make sure that that sizes correctly. But other than that, you can see that north and southbound lanes were individual, and everything plays smooth, and everything is great. And that's what I got. That's my time today.
All right, thanks, Willie. A couple of questions or comments came up about, I guess I'll sum it up as kind of this technique versus traffic simulation. And I think it's important to point out that those are two very different solutions. Traffic simulation being more automated and more about analysis, but still providing animation of vehicles on the road. Whereas what you're doing is you can control every aspect of that animation, right down to choosing which cars you want to use and how they interact with each other and where they speed up and slow down. You have complete control. So there are more steps. It's more complicated, but you have complete control over what the result is.
That's exactly right. So the biggest difference is, yes, and you guys have seen the traffic control demo most likely, and the traffic control, you set your stop bars, you set all that information, the travel speed and the vehicles, everything is random, everything is applied. You cannot, you can't leave, you don't have control over who's going where. This one is a more complicated process, but I can leave this on with the traffic simulation turned off. I don't need to have traffic simulation turned on and have that module running in the background to be able to continue to see the simulated traffic. So if I wanted to share the model or create a video from it, I would need to, there's portions that you can use from traffic simulation, but this one you have complete control over. You set your paths. It is a few more steps, and it does look like it could be complicated to set the keyframes, but once you get the spacing correct, it really starts to fall into place, and when you've done it a couple of times, it really gets easier and easier. But you can see the results are, I have complete control versus random, and I can't always have the traffic simulation open and running inside of the InfraWorks model. That's the biggest difference.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but another advantage to what you've shown us is that we can capture that in a storyboard or an animation, whereas it's a little tougher to do that with traffic simulation.
I don't believe that you can have the traffic simulation turned on when you're doing storyboard type work inside of InfraWorks at this time. May be coming, but right now it's not. So if you wanted to do a storyboard, create a fly-through, drive-through animation, now you can have your vehicles flowing along with you rather than just stationary on the roads.
Very good. I saw a question about something that was missed in session 2. I'll encourage you all to go back to the community site and review parts 1 and 2. The recordings are available, and you'll see kind of everything that Dave and Willie have shown up to this point.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't have time to go through all of the individual steps, but everything that we did to export from InfraWorks to Civil, and then from Civil into Studio Max, and from Studio Max back into InfraWorks, all of those steps were very specifically outlined in the previous webcast. I just didn't have time, unfortunately, to get to all of those today. I'm sorry about that.
Overall, the series has just been fantastic. So thank you to you, Willie, and I'll thank Dave later. For now, I just want to remind everyone that our next webcast is coming up not the first week in February, but the second, actually. It's going to be February 10th. We've got some information about what's new in InfraWorks 360 at that time. It's not something you're going to want to miss, so make sure you keep your eyes on the community site and all the social media channels that we post to, so that you can reserve your spot for that webcast. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up, and thank you again, Willie, and thank you to everyone who attended, and we'll see you all and hopefully more on February 10th. Have a great day.